Hi there. I want to thank you for tuning into my weekly show. My name is Doug Zanes. I'm a personal injury attorney in Arizona. I've got offices in both Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona, and I have one of the bigger personal injury law firms in Arizona. And I do this show every week to talk about different legal issues, provide information to people that I hope is helpful and that everybody who's listening to this finds interesting. But today I want to talk about motorcycles and motorcycle accidents, in large part because if you are, if you like to ride motorcycles, it's important you understand some safety issues that I'll talk about. But where I want to start with is simply the dangers involved in riding a motorcycle. Excuse me, because as you know, riding a motorcycle is much different than driving a vehicle. Quite frankly, when you're in a car or a truck or a closed-in vehicle, you can get away with a lot and still be safe and still be fine when it's all said and done. If you're on a motorcycle, you don't really have that luxury because if you're in an accident on a motorcycle, the odds of you being severely injured or killed are much greater than they are in a closed-in vehicle. So it actually, riding a motorcycle takes a different skill set and, quite honestly, a different mindset than driving a vehicle. I mean, it just really does. And so it's important that anybody who's considering getting a motorcycle think about that. I mean, it's not just about, motorcycles being cool. And so that, I think, is a very important piece. Because if we go back and look at statistics, the good news is in recent years, fatalities or the rate of fatalities on motorcycles and the numbers of motorcycle accidents has actually slightly decreased from 2012 on. So that's a good thing. Having said that, though, I mean, if I look at 2012, 60 out of every 100,000 registered motorcycles was involved in a fatal crash. So that's 60 out of 100,000. And now this compares to only 14 out of 100,000 of passenger cars. So that shows you a huge difference. So if you're on a motorcycle, the reality of it is you are much more likely to be involved in a fatal crash statistically than you ever are in a car. That's just a fact, and it has nothing to do with the skill set of riders or your abilities or any of those things. That's just a statistical fact that you need to understand. In addition, motorcyclists are about 26 times more likely than passenger car occupants to die in a crash when statistically we look at the per vehicle miles traveled, and you're 5 times more likely than somebody in a passenger car would be to be injured. Again, the odds are against you, and I don't say that to scare anybody. I don't, I want you to be informed if you either ride a motorcycle or are thinking about riding a motorcycle. And those are important things to understand. Older riders statistically are more likely to be more severely injured than younger riders. And when I say older, all the statistics look at 50 years of age and up versus under 50. And that's important, because, again, depending on your age, you need to factor that into that skill set and that mindset that's really needed to put yourself in the best position to be safe and survive a motorcycle accident. Excuse me. So those are important things. Another thing I want to hit on is alcohol consumption. According to the National Highway Transportation Association, In 2012, 27% of motorcycle riders involved in fatal crashes had a blood alcohol level above the legal limit. I mean, that's just crazy. If you're on a motorcycle, because it does take such a high skill set and mindset to ride that motorcycle safely. Unfortunately, I don't think drinking and driving is really an option that you have. I mean, I guess it's an option. You can do it, and nobody can stop you. But it really is dangerous. Quite frankly, it's much more dangerous than it would be to drive a car. Certainly for you personally, because again, you have no protection. And that's important because, when you look at sort of how accidents happen or the majority of accidents that occur, the most prevalent, I guess 75% of accidents, include both a passenger and a driver. Only 25% of them are the driver alone. But when we look at single vehicle accidents with motorcycles, rider error, is really the overriding factor. And that rider error comes, typically from, slide out and falls that occur on motorcycles, or because of overbraking or kind of running a wide turn. Which again is much more prevalent if you've been drinking and you don't have all your faculties 100% with you. The faster you're going on a motorcycle, the more likely you are to be hurt. And so again, if you've been drinking, it's harder to kind of gauge speed or stay at what you normally would know as safe speeds because, you've been drinking and you're, potentially going to be more reckless. So keep that in mind. I mean, just make it easy. Don't drink and drive when you're on a motorcycle. Now, if we look at kind of most accidents that occur, the first type of accident that you really need to be aware of is when a car is turning left in front of you and you're riding on a motorcycle. And really what happens is, psychologically, the driver of a passenger vehicle isn't in tune to look for a motorcycle. That's one of the dangers that you as a motorcyclist have, is other drivers who are in cars psychologically aren't tuned into looking out for you on a motorcycle. They're looking for other cars, and then to probably a lesser degree, pedestrians. But psychologically, they're not looking for motorcycles, and that's one of the reasons, quite honestly, so many passenger car drivers never see the motorcyclists that they hit. You're also really subject to blind spots because motorcycles are much smaller than cars and they move much quicker. Blind spots, naturally occur in vehicles because of the structure of the vehicle and and how it's built. But then you also have blind spots that are created by other vehicles on the road, trees, signs, light poles, all kinds of other things. And so that's really important, And so really what happens is when you talk about riding a motorcycle defensively, as you're coming up to a situation where there's potentially a vehicle that wants to turn left in front of you, one, you have to identify that situation. So when I talk about motorcycle riders needing a different mindset and skill set, I mean, really, you've got to be in tune with what's going on around you, with all the cars around you, in addition to those vehicles up in front of you that are looking to turn left. And if they're looking to turn left, then you want to, quite frankly, determine if they actually see you. As you look at the driver, is the driver looking at you, or is he looking somewhere else? As you look at the driver, does he seem to be creeping out and ready to go as you approach, or does it appear that he's actually or she's actually seen you and is waiting for you to go through the intersection? But the way you avoid a driver turning left in front of you, quite simply, is you need to see it coming. I mean, that's how you avoid it. Part of your job as a motorcyclist is, to look for all those signs that indicate what other drivers are going to do. And so, as the car's at the intersection waiting to turn, or the other thing that happens is you've got to look for gaps in traffic. Because if you're, let's say, on a 3-lane road and traffic's backed up and there's a gap, that's also a place where you've got to really be concerned about a driver turning left in front of you, because that gap conceivably was left for a driver to turn into, let's say, a shopping center or something like that. And so if you're coming up the lane that's not backed up, you need to be aware of the fact that somebody may be turning left in front of you into a driveway or a parking lot. But in either situation, one, you want to make sure you slow down. So your speed is at a place where you're able to react if that driver doesn't see you and pulls in front of you, and stop in a way that protects you. So you want to slow down. You want to cover your brakes and get ready to use evasive action if you need to. And you also want to account for objects outside your vision, that may be in their way, like we had talked about, may be creating blind spots, whether it's other cars or trees. Because the idea is, if this car turns in front of you, really what you want to do is slow your speed down as much as you possibly can before you hit that car. I mean, that's the difference in a motorcycle accident between life and death, quite honestly, is how fast are you going at the point of impact. Now, in everything that I know about motorcycle riding, you don't want to lay your bike down, because the problem with laying your bike down if somebody turns left in front of you is you don't shed speed nearly as quickly as you will if you know how to effectively use your braking. And that's the key when it comes to really being an experienced motorcycle rider is, have you had the training? Do you know how to do all those things? Do you know how to effectively use your front and back brakes in different situations to shed as much speed as possible, as quickly as possible? So you don't want to lay your bike down. You want to brake. You want to shed as much speed as you can before that impact occurs. And that, quite frankly, can and typically is the difference between a fatal accident and going home with bumps and bruises. So that's the big thing. That's one of the big accidents that you want to watch out for, somebody turning left in front of you. Another big area of accidents for motorcycles is hitting gravel on a blind corner. So when you come around a corner, suddenly, boom, there's gravel in front of you, and you hit it, whether it's gravel, whether it's, a stick on the road, whether it's, just any object that's on the road. And the way you avoid it is, quite frankly, the way you avoid that accident is to not hit whatever that object is in the first place. And the way you don't hit it is you ride at a pace where, your reaction time, gives you the ability to adjust and maneuver the way you need to when you see it. Because remember, when you're riding a motorcycle, your sight, your view, what you can see, is one of the most important parts of safety. And so, you want to, depending on your vision and what you can see, should dictate how fast you go. And so you want to ride at a pace that allows you, if you come around this blind curve and there is something there, you have the ability to adjust and maneuver and not hit it in the first place. The idea really is, as you come into a blind curve, is really slow in to the curve and fast out. that's how you do it safely. That you also want to enter a corner wide, because by entering the corner wide, you again increase your field of vision, like I just talked about. And so that's very important. You want to increase your field of vision and do it at an easy pace, and then as you kind of hit that corner and you can see what's in front of you, then you speed up, and that's the slow in, speed out piece. Excuse me. One of the other major ways motorcycle accidents occur is by the motorcyclist entering a corner too fast. Again, it's the goal is to ride at a pace where you can control your bike, where you can adjust to the environment around you. And but if you end up in a situation where you've unexpectedly hit a corner, and it's tightening up on you, and you're just having you're going too fast, you think, to make it around, that's what creates accidents. And so how do you avoid it? And really the way is, again, to ride smart. It really is to ride smart, to ride at a pace where you can control your motorcycle and adjust for any environmental factors or any other situations going on around you. And if you do that, you're not going to go into a corner too fast. But if you end up, and I guess another way to approach the corner is you need to use visual cues, the trees around you, telephone poles, in order to judge the road's direction, where it's turning, where it's going. And if you're going too fast to really be able to do that, then you want to slow down because you're moving too quickly. Now, if you find yourself going too fast in a corner, I think the best approach really is to trust the bike. I mean, it really is, and try to make it, try to essentially ride it out. The bikes, the way they build bikes these days is they've got a lot of capability, to grip the road, to corner, to do all those things. So really what happens is it's not the bike that's not capable of making the corner, it's you as the rider that's not capable of making that corner. And so one of the things you certainly want to do if you find yourself in that situation is to trust the bike and try to ride it out. You want to take as much lean out of the bike as possible by hanging off. You want to look where you want to go and be as smooth as possible on the controls. You don't want to whack the brakes or chop the throttle, which will sort of upset the steadiness of the bike. And you don't want to panic. If your peg or your knee or something touches down, don't panic. Again, you want to just try to hold, that lean and hold the angle and ride it out through the corner, as best you can. That is the best way to avoid that potential accident if you enter a corner too fast. One of the other main ways that motorcycle accidents occur is when a car changes lanes into you. And this happens all the time. Drivers of passenger vehicles don't see you. The drivers, they're looking for cars. Like I talked about earlier, the drivers of cars aren't psychologically programmed to see motorcycles. And so, as they're driving along, they don't see you. So you need to be aware of that. How do you avoid an accident, or how do you avoid being hit by a car who's changing lanes into you? Is one, you want to be aware of where the blind spots lie. I mean, that's very, very important, and you want to make sure you're not in the vehicle's blind spots. I mean, one rule of thumb is if you can look in the mirrors of the car and see the driver's eyes, then the driver can probably see you. And so that's a very important piece. And you want to make sure you're aware of situations where drivers may want to change lanes. So if you're coming up on backed up traffic and you're in a lane that's not backed up as much, be aware that drivers in those backed up lanes are probably interested in changing into your lane. And so you want to control your speed. You want to be aware of everybody around you. You want to make sure that if a driver changes lanes into your lane, that you see that coming, that you see that first, and you adjust to that so you don't end up in an accident. Also look for signs like turn signals. Look at the angles of tires. If you see the tires kind of changing angles as if they're going to change lanes, slow down and let them into the lane. If you see the vehicle sort of moving around within its lane as if the driver's trying to get ready to change lanes, he's trying to check, look in his mirrors, look behind him, make sure there isn't any other cars that he's going to hit. That's an indicator that he's going to change lanes and give him room. Very important. The other, and a very, very serious type of accident, but one of the last main type of accident that I want to talk to is when a car hits you from behind. Again, that's what's known as a fender bender with what we do as personal injury attorneys, right? Rear end accidents. Two vehicles, two cars rear end each other. That's a fender bender. Generally not a big deal. People walk away and they're fine. In fact, I got into one a month ago. Somebody rear-ended me. I'm driving a big GMC Yukon. It wasn't a big deal. Caused a lot of damage to the back of my truck, but I was fine. That same accident on a motorcycle can easily kill the person riding the motorcycle. I probably got rear-ended at 35, 40 miles an hour. So again, you're at a much greater disadvantage than somebody who's in a car. And you need to be aware of that. So if you're riding in traffic, and there's a car stopped in front of you, let's say at a light, at a red light. One way to avoid a rear-end accident is if there's just a single car there, is to actually pull up in front of that car. I mean, really what you're doing is you're creating a cushion between you and somebody who would rear-end you. When you do it, you want to be polite about it. You want to wave at the driver, and because the driver probably won't realize the reason you're actually doing it is for safety. They're thinking you're cutting in front of them. But again, that's what you want to do to protect yourself. Because if you just stop right behind that car, boom, you really are at much greater risk of getting rear-ended. If you're not able to do that, then you want to stop as far to one side as you can. And you want to be aware of who's coming up behind you. You want to make sure that you have the ability, that you keep your right hand on the throttle, that you keep your bike in gear. Because if you see somebody coming up behind you who's going to hit you, you want to be able to, quite frankly, move your bike out of the way. So he just slams into the car that's actually off to one side of you, in front of you. Because again, this is life and death. If you're riding a bike, what you're looking for, quite honestly, is to create what's called a crumple zone. A cushion for you where you're not going to get hurt. And you need to be aware of the times when you may get rear-ended by a vehicle. And it's stopped at a stoplight. Stopped, in particular, stopped at things like stop signs, or crosswalks. What about these pedestrian crosswalks where the light starts flashing red and you stop for a pedestrian? Not everybody sees that, and you really, really want to make sure you know what's going on in your surroundings under those circumstances. But be aware of when you're stopping and when you may be rear-ended, so you can make those adjustments that you need to make. So those are the main circumstances where you really need to protect yourselves, that you really need to be aware of in order to approach those circumstances safely, for your safety. So I hope this was helpful to anybody who loves riding bikes. They're wonderful things. Motorcycles are wonderful things. It's a wonderful lifestyle. You just want to make sure you understand that, quite frankly, people driving cars most importantly, aren't psychologically wired to look for you on the motorcycle. And that's compounded by the fact that motorcycles are small and they're fast and they tend to be hard to see. So you have to look out for your own safety. And so I hope this was helpful. Until next week, take care of yourself.